Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are strapping on the sixth string and exploring a piece of gear that, while it might be less glamorous than a vintage tube amp, has been an absolutely essential workhorse for guitarists for, 3 decades now?
That's right.
We're deep diving not into some boutique fuzz or, hand-wired circuits, but into the digital world of the multi-effects unit that really defined accessibility and performance for the masses.
The legendary Boss SME series.
The legendary Boss SME series.
And we have a really deep, rich stack of sources today tracing the technological and cultural evolution of this iconic family of processors. We're starting way back with the ME5 in the mid-90s and taking it all the way up to the ME80, which was just hugely successful. But this is so much more than just a list of features.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a really detailed look at how Boss S solved this fundamental conflict for the gigging musician. I mean, how do you offer virtually every effect you could possibly need without forcing the player to spend their entire sound check just staring into some tiny, complex digital menu?
Exactly. Our mission today is to trace that arc, to see how the ME series so successfully balanced, sheer digital processing power, which just grew exponentially through the 90s and 2000s.
Right.
With that absolutely crucial, intuitive, stomp box style control that guitarists just demand when they're under the pressure of a live performance. It's really the story of the all-in-one rig being perfected. Maybe not in terms of ultimate fidelity, but in terms of unbeatable usability.
The sources really highlight that this ME family, it was explicitly designed for a very specific type of player, and that's you, the learner, who needs knowledge quickly but thoroughly, and who wants that ready-to-go setup. This is the player who craves the all-in-one rig, the effects, the amp simulation, the control system, all of it, built into one compact, reliable unit.
And they need quick preset recall. They need to be live ready.
They need to be live ready, but, and this is really the key design constraint BS has always honored, they absolutely prefer physical knobs and stomp box interfaces over frustrating menu diving.
Okay, let's unpack this. If you're that musician, you're looking for routing options, expandability maybe, but you don't want to carry a full, heavy rack unit and some sprawling pedal board the size of a coffee table.
No, especially if you play small venues or fly to gigs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the ME series, as we're going to demonstrate, it provided this continuous refinement of the interface, the processing power, and the adaptability required to fit into modern rigs as the technology evolved.
It really did. We're talking about a unit that had to adapt to both tube amps and direct-to-PA setups, all while keeping that physical experience totally familiar.
It's important to put this in context.
It is. I mean, when this series began in the mid-90s, the world of guitar effects was just sharply divided.
Yeah.
You had your compact pedals, which were reliable, but, pretty limited in scope.
One sound per box.
Exactly. Or you had these large, expensive, and often really confusing rack units. They offered immense power, but they were just intimidating to program and operate, especially mid-song.
Right.
The ME series sought to marry the immediacy of the compact pedal with the immense power and programmability of the rack unit, all housed in a rugged floor unit.
Which was a radical proposition for the average working musician at the time.
Completely radical.
So where did this critical journey begin? We have to go back to the mid-1990s, specifically 1995 for the introduction of the progenitor, the ME5. This unit wasn't the pinnacle, obviously, but it established the fundamental blueprint that all the future ME units would follow.
The ME5 was hugely significant because, while Boss S had previous digital processors, this was one of their earliest multi-effects to consciously incorporate that dedicated pedal-style control system designed for the floor.
The industrial design just screamed, "Stomp on me."
It did. It made it so clear. This wasn't a desktop unit. It was built for stomping. It was aimed squarely at bringing powerful, compact multi-effects right into practice rooms, rehearsal studios, and small stages.
It was about democratizing access to programmable sound.
Exactly.
Let's delve into its architecture, because its simplicity is really what set the foundation and dictated the whole workflow. It was DSP-based.
Right.
And it focused on the 5 core building blocks every guitarist needs. Gain, so your drive, modulation, delay, reverb, and pitch effects.
It wasn't trying to do everything. It was trying to do the essentials really, really reliably.
And this foundational system delivered over 80 preset patches.
Which for 1995, 80 different programmable sounds ready to go? That was a considerable library. I mean, just think about the alternative.
Buying, powering, connecting 80 individual stomp boxes.
Forget it. And the interface was minimal, certainly by today's standards. You had a simple 2-digit or small dot matrix LCD display and single rotary or slider parameters for editing. It was rugged and it was compact, a massive pro for players needing immediate sound recall without all the complexity.
But the crucial architectural point here, and one that really provides context for the entire evolution of the ME line, is what was deliberately missing. Our sources make it crystal clear. The ME5 had no amp modeling or cab simulation.
None.
It was effects only. This meant you were entirely dependent on your existing amplifier, its tone, its characteristics, its speaker, for your fundamental sonic identity.
Exactly. And that decision immediately defined its usage. Its tonal profile centered around immediately usable sounds, even if they lacked the depth or nuance of modern algorithms.
So we're talking foundational combinations.
Yeah. Basic crunch, late overdrive, simple chorus, phaser, flanger, and tremolo. Its primary use was augmenting existing clean or slightly broken up amps. It wasn't a rig replacement.
Right. It excelled in practice setups and simple live rigs for players who prioritized quick, reliable effects over, deep editing.
The ME5 proved the core floor unit concept worked. It established the form factor and the workflow that emphasized performance.
But it immediately hit a ceiling, right? In terms of processing and feature depth. And that market demand pushed Ball SS very quickly to its successor, the ME8, which was released just 2 years later in 1997.
The transition was incredibly swift. I mean, the competition in digital effects was just heating up.
So the ME8 is defined as this necessary transitional multi-effects unit.
It is. It took the ME5's architecture and just dramatically expanded the engine. It was built directly on the ME5's success by adding more effects and, critically, deeper editing capabilities.
It was bridging that gap between the basic early processors and the newer, more sophisticated hybrid pedal-style units that were starting to hit the market.
Exactly.
Technically, this was a huge boost. It had an expanded DSP chip, a much broader effects palette, and it jumped to over 200 presets.
More than doubling the ME5's capacity.
And that technological investment allowed Ball SS to include features that gigging musicians have been asking for, like external foot switch support and a more detailed display. It showed Ball SS was serious about supporting more complex stage setups.
And that DSP expansion wasn't just about quantity, it was about quality. The sound quality leap in the ME8 was significant.
How so?
Well, it featured a noticeably richer modulation engine. The choruses sounded less brittle, the phasers felt more organic, and it offered better delay types. The result was presets that were far more polished and usable in a professional live context.
So its use case naturally shifted. It went from just practice rooms to serious band rehearsals and full gigging rigs.
Absolutely. Especially within those burgeoning late 90s alternative and post-rock scenes that were really defining themselves through modulated soundscapes.
Yeah, the ME8 was popular because it gave gigging players access to a much larger effect library and, crucially, allowed for more subtle nuances in modulation and time-based effects.
If you were trying to dial in those layered atmospheric sounds that characterize so much of mid to late 90s music, this gave you that palette.
Reliably and affordably.
What's fascinating here, and it connects right back to our core mission, is that the ME8's massive popularity in the late 90s, it truly shows the prevailing market demand. This unit became one of Boss S's most popular pre-modeling multi-effects. This proves that there is a huge core segment of the market that prioritized readily available high-quality effects.
Just effects.
Designed specifically to enhance their existing tube or solid-state amps before the proliferation of digital amp modeling really took hold. They wanted effects, not amp replacements.
Right. It solidified the idea that the ME series wasn't trying to replace your whole sound system. It was about replacing your sprawling, expensive, and logistically painful pedal board with one compact, programmable, reliable unit.
But the core constraint was still there.
The core constraint remained. The ME8, despite its technological leap, still suffered from a menu-heavy navigation for deep editing, and crucially, it still completely lacked any amp or cabinet modeling.
And that lack of modeling, while it was limiting in some ways, it kept the focus on usability. The engineers had fewer parameters to clutter the interface with.
Good point.
Which meant they could dedicate the precious DSP to improving the quality of the effects that were there. It was a trade-off that historically we see paid off massively in terms of market acceptance for that era.
So now we cross the critical threshold into the 2000s, and this is where the ME series hits its absolute stride and defines the legacy that we remember today.
This is the moment.
This is where the conceptual shift happens, moving the focus entirely from merely sequencing digital effects to ruthlessly optimizing the physical performance interface.
Yes. This is the moment they stopped trying to make a digital box that held effects and instead committed to building a digital box that felt and acted exactly like a traditional rugged analog pedal board.
They wanted the benefits of digital without the drawbacks of the digital interface.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The ME50, released in 2002, is the true game changer in terms of workflow and user experience. It introduced even more powerful DSP, improved editing, but the truly revolutionary leap
was the controls.
The introduction of those StompBox-focused controls via dedicated physical wheels and knobs for every core parameter, allowing for instant, real-time tweaking.
That decision was foundational, and it was a direct counterattack against the dominant trend of the time.
Oh, yeah.
While competitors like Line 6 were gaining traction with their early POD units, which had revolutionary amp modeling but forced you into deep menu diving on these tiny screens,
Right.
DSS clearly recognized that guitarists inherently prefer turning a physical knob to scrolling through parameter lists on an LCD, especially mid-song.
The ME50 was deliberately positioned as the anti-menu diving rig. It was the perfect compromise between digital power and analog familiarity.
The architecture reflects that philosophy perfectly. While it had a respectable 99 user patches, the simplicity of the signal chain was crucial. You had 3 main banks of controls: drive, modulation, and delay reverb.
Each with its own set of dedicated physical dials.
Exactly like 3 separate stomp boxes. Everything was designed for the stage. Dedicated performance foot switches, stereo outputs, and a sturdy integrated tuner.
And the effects richness had grown significantly by then, too.
Oh, massively. The sources detail a really deep palette. Not just standard overdrive and distortion, but a highly usable modulation section with chorus, phaser, flanger, the classic Univibe sound, and tremolo.
And they dramatically enhanced the quality of the delay, reverb, pitch, and the filter wash section. The goal was breadth of high-quality effects, not necessarily modeling realism.
Exactly.
And crucially, its tonal profile was highly praised for its transparency and clarity. The overdrives and delays were deemed extremely usable for live performance.
Which was absolutely vital because, let's remind the listener, the ME50 still had no amp modeling. So if you were running a high-end Fender Twin or a Marshall JCM, you wanted the ME50's effects to integrate cleanly and transparently with your existing tube amp tone, not digitally dominate it.
So we need to address this critique about repeating the lack of modeling. In the ME50 era, that wasn't a flaw, it was a design strength.
It was a philosophical statement. Bios S was building the ultimate pedal board replacement for the 80% of gigging musicians who already owned and loved a physical amp.
Its significance can't be overstated. The ME50 became a true widespread staple. It was adopted globally in practice spaces, small gigs, specifically by players who absolutely prioritized the StompBox feel and quick recall over the need for internal amp simulation.
Totally.
I think we need to challenge that idea for a moment, though. If the Line 6 POD came out in '98 with amp modeling, and the ME50 came out 4 years later in 2002, still without it, was Bios S being willfully resistant to market trends, or were they questioning the fidelity of the early modeling at that price point?
That is a superb question, and the sources suggest both elements were at play, but the emphasis was on production priority.
Okay.
BOSS and Roland already had the GT series, which did feature early modeling, but those units were more expensive and often suffered from the same menu diving complexity the ME series was trying to avoid.
So to integrate quality modeling into the ME50's simpler DSP while keeping the price accessible would have required a huge compromise somewhere else.
A huge compromise. Either in effect quality or interface simplicity. They chose to preserve the interface and the effect quality, thus maintaining its role as the ultimate amp enhancer. It was a conscious decision to serve the largest demographic, the player with a decent amp but no complex pedal board.
So if the ME50 was the revolution, we moved swiftly to the ME70 in 2005, which was really a meticulous refinement of that successful concept.
It didn't reinvent the StompBox interface, but it added necessary digital depth.
Right.
The ME70 focused squarely on deepening the digital effects engine and making the workflow more flexible. It featured a larger, more informative display, much easier navigation for patch programming, and a structure that allowed for much more sophisticated effects routing.
We see a significant DSP boost here.
A big one, yeah. And it enabled what the sources call true chain block editing.
That technical term, true chain block editing, is critical. We need to clarify what that meant in practical terms for you, the listener. What could you do on the ME70 that you couldn't do easily on the ME50?
Well, On the earlier units, the effects chain was often fixed. Drive always came before mod, delay always came after reverb or something like that.
A rigid order.
Very rigid. A constraint of older DSP systems. True chain block editing on the ME70 meant that within the digital structure, you could, for the first time in the ME series, change the order of the effects blocks.
So you could run a delay into a phaser?
Or flip the order of your modulation blocks, allowing for much more creative and unique sound design. This was a massive step toward rack unit flexibility, but housed in a stomp box shell.
The features really demonstrate that depth. It expanded delay and reverb types, adding modes like reverse delay or warmer plate reverb.
And critically, it included 3 separate assignable modulation blocks alongside enhanced pitch effects.
Which, for a player who relied heavily on complex layered modulation, say, an ambient guitarist, this was a truly massive upgrade over the simpler single mod section of the ME50.
Oh, huge. The ME70 therefore served multi-effects needs exceptionally well for the professional live performer.
And the source notes mention a surprising use case.
They do. It was considered very good for processing keyboards and synthesizers too, thanks to that rich effects engine, the full stereo output, and the ability to handle line-level signals cleanly.
Yet, despite all this depth, the better display, the true chain editing, the advanced DSP, we are still dealing with a high-end multi-effects unit that still did not feature full amp modeling or cab simulation.
It's the last unit in the traditional ME lineage to hold that line.
And that position, in 2005, proved that a substantial, sophisticated market still existed for these advanced, performance-focused units built to leverage a player's existing high-quality amp.
The ME70 was the last stand of the effects-only philosophy within the ME line. It stood as a high-water mark for combining analog-style control with profound digital flexibility. It said clearly, "We respect your amp, and we're just here to make it sound better."
And from a design perspective, that balancing act, finding the sweet spot between clear screen feedback and maintaining the dedicated physical knob control, profoundly influenced the UI of later, more advanced processors across the whole industry.
It really set a standard that accessibility does not have to come at the expense of powerful editing.
So now we come to the final processor in this traditional series, the one that finally introduced the missing element to the platform and, you could argue, cemented the ME series legacy worldwide.
The ME80.
The ME80, released in 2007. This is the moment BOSS decided to pivot and embrace the all-in-one future.
The ME80 is rightly described as the pinnacle of the traditional ME series, and maybe its greatest commercial success. It was the last major iteration before the industry shifted entirely towards even more complex, screen-dominated digital platforms.
And its success hinges on one crucial, long-awaited addition.
That's right. Finally, the introduction of a complete amp modeling engine, which was derived from the technology in their higher-end GT series.
After all those years of providing effects only, the ME80 included basic but highly usable amp types and drive models.
And this transformed the unit from an advanced pedal board replacement into a true standalone all-in-one rig.
Something capable of going direct to front of house.
Exactly. This change was absolutely necessary to meet the evolving needs of the modern gigging musician. It addressed the core requirement of players who didn't want to carry a heavy amp at all.
Or those who needed reliable, high-quality direct-to-PA sound for small venues, rehearsal spaces, or fly dates where you can't guarantee the backline.
The timing was perfect. Digital modeling had matured just enough to be truly useful and musically satisfying in a compact, mid-priced unit like this.
But what made the ME80 so specifically beloved wasn't just the modeling. It was the physical architecture that housed it. BOSS didn't sacrifice the core ME philosophy simplicity and immediacy for the new features. Instead, they doubled down on intuitive control.
That's the key differentiating factor. The ME80 is famous because its control layout perfectly married the amp modeling with the stomp box interface. It featured dedicated knobs for every major block.
Not just drive, mod, and delay.
No, but also dedicated physical controls for EQ, reverb, even presence. This made real-time tweaking feel entirely intuitive. It operated exactly like a collection of separate stomps and amp head, all integrated into one chassis.
Just think about the practical difference that makes on a dark stage. You can adjust your master gain or your delay feedback on the fly without ever entering a single menu.
That immediate tactile feedback was essential for live performance. It far surpassed the menu-driven editing required by most of its contemporary competition, even those with superior modeling fidelity.
And the performance area was built for maximum utility. 6 massive foot switches, mapped for flexibility. You could seamlessly switch between patch control, changing everything at once, and effect on-off, turning individual blocks on and off like true stomp boxes.
And it had dedicated tap, tempo, and looper control in the final retail versions. For a live guitarist, that immediate tactile control is just invaluable. It represents the culmination of 12 years of interface refinement.
And the tonal coverage expanded dramatically because the amp models covered the essential range needed for pretty much any gigging scenario.
Yeah, we're talking reliable emulations of clean Fender-style voices, the classic British crunch tones,
Marshall Vox territory,
modern high-gain distortion for metal and heavy rock, and cleaner boutique voices. And these were combined seamlessly with that robust effects library and fully programmable patches.
So this broad coverage meant the ME80 was instantly relevant to nearly every genre. The use cases just exploded.
It became ideal for players who needed a true all-in-one rig, for those gigging without the logistics headache of a physical amp, for practice setups.
And especially for recording direct-in, offering DIW-friendly presets coupled with the included USB interface.
The commercial success was immediate. It became one of Boss's most successful multi-effect processors of its era. Exceptionally popular in fields that demand absolute reliability and simplicity.
Worship players, musicians running small gig rigs, and significantly fly-date musicians and students who needed professional sound without all the complexity or excessive cost.
However, to maintain our analytical depth, we have to balance the books.
Right.
While the ME80 was the pinnacle of usability, we have to acknowledge its technical considerations. The sources note that its modeling engine, while robust and perfectly usable, was still limited compared to later, dedicated, and usually more expensive flagship processors.
Like the Bosch GT series or high-end Line 6 units.
Exactly.
And I think that's the crucial distinction for you, the learner. The ME80 wasn't trying to win a fidelity contest against highly specialized modelers that required hours of parameter tweaking.
Not at all.
It was trying to be the most accessible and usable all-in-one solution on the market. And it succeeded profoundly by prioritizing user experience and speed over the pursuit of minute digital realism.
It combined three things perfectly: robust, gig-ready amp models, a comprehensive effect library inherited from the ME70, and that signature Stompbox-style performance interface. It didn't just meet a need, it created a benchmark for practical usability that the industry is still chasing today.
So we've covered the ground from the ME5 in 1995 to the game-changing ME80 in 2007. Now let's synthesize the entire series. So what does this all mean? What does this evolutionary track, particularly the delayed adoption of amp modeling, tell us about the relationship between guitarists and technology?
Well, it tells a fascinating story of stepwise growth in capability that was surprisingly conservative when it came to adopting the most powerful but potentially complex technology available.
Right.
ATEM continuously prioritized user experience and workflow reliability over simply chasing the cutting edge of digital realism.
So if we summarize that evolution through the lens of features, the ME5 and ME8 offered essential and enhanced effects power, respectively, but they absolutely lacked amp modeling.
They were pure pedal board replacements designed to be run through existing amps.
Then came the revolutionary ME50 and the refined ME70. These brought significant deep DSP improvements, truly revolutionary performance interfaces, and crucial features like true chain block editing.
Yet they still deliberately avoided full amp modeling.
They cemented their role as the perfect companion for the tube amp enthusiast. They actively resisted the trend of the all-digital replacement rig.
It wasn't until the ME80 that Bias finally married the two worlds, recognizing that modeling had matured enough to integrate seamlessly into their performance-centric design.
So it introduced high-quality amp modeling alongside very deep DSP and that unparalleled layout of physical performance knobs.
The ME80, therefore, was the unit that validated every single design choice that came before it. It proved that when the functionality was right, the interface was ready.
Culturally, the ME line achieved something profound.
It did. It provided accessible, everyday multi-effects for the masses throughout a complex technological transition period, the 90s and 2000s. It was the entry point for millions of players into the world of digital processing because it never felt like a computer.
It felt like a sophisticated yet familiar pedal board.
Exactly.
It truly served as the go-to all-in-one rig for the average guitarist, especially before the truly deep flagship modeling units, like the high-end GT series, the Avid 11 rack, or the POD XT-HD, came to dominate the landscape.
It was reliable, relatively inexpensive, and most importantly, easy for you to figure out 10 minutes before a gig started when stress levels are high.
Its greatest achievement was successfully bridging that philosophical gap between compact single stomp effects and the full standalone modelers.
It proved to the industry definitively that musicians wanted both high-quality digital processing and the familiar physical, tactile interface they grew up with. They didn't want to sacrifice immediate control for digital fidelity.
And that design choice had serious long-term downstream effects that we still see today. The ME philosophy balancing performance control with digital power directly influenced the trajectory toward later, more complex products.
Absolutely. The stomp box mode, or manual mode, found on today's highest-end modelers, which dedicates switches to individual effects on-off,
Right.
that owes a direct debt to the ME50 and especially the ME80's design ethos. They showed that, fundamentally, guitarists want to step on a button and know exactly what it does.
This focus on practical ergonomics provided a necessary counterpoint to the relentless pursuit of digital realism.
It really did. While competitors were spending their DS key budget chasing the minute characteristics of vintage Transformer sag, Bell SS was spending theirs ensuring that the player could reach the chorus depth knob instantly and intuitively.
On stage, performance is king.
And simplicity breeds confidence.
Furthermore, the ME series demonstrated tremendous long-term value. I mean, even the ME50 and ME70 are still highly sought after by players who already own a boutique tube amp and just want high-quality, transparent digital effects they can adjust quickly.
Without having to pay for modeling features they don't need.
Exactly. The units are still functional, still reliable, and still provide that signature usability that defined them.
And that residual value underscores their legacy. They were built to last, both physically and technologically, because their core function-providing reliable, easy-to-use effects has never become obsolete, regardless of how realistic amp modeling has become.
The ME80 represents the ultimate realization of that vision.
Maximum flexibility delivered through minimum complexity. It remains the gold standard for that particular hybrid unit.
Looking back across these 4 generations, the ME series wasn't just about iterating on old technology. It was about highly focused innovation based strictly on user workflow demands.
By the time the ME80 arrived, it had proven that prioritizing performance, immediacy, and physical tweakability was a long-term winning formula. That deep focus on usability is precisely what kept the series relevant, even as raw processing power shifted rapidly around it.
It sets a high standard for on-stage usability.
A standard that newer, often more powerful units still struggle to emulate when they bury core functions under layers of menus and submenus.
It's a perfect case study in understanding the true needs of the player. A guitarist needs speed, reliability, and tactile control over exhaustive complexity on a dark, loud stage. The ME80 put 8 dedicated knobs right on the floor, and you knew exactly what each one did.
You could dial in a significant sound adjustment in seconds. A luxury most screen-based modelers still can't offer without pre-programming.
Precisely. And that, you, the listener, is the core takeaway we want you to carry forward from this history. The evolution of this series teaches us a lot about technology adoption in the musical world.
The best technology isn't always the one that sounds the most realistic, but the one that makes performance the easiest.
Thank you for joining us for this extensive deep dive into the evolution of the BAW SS ME series. It's a fantastic case study in how simple, intentional design can often outlast complex, rapidly changing engineering.
We leave you with this final provocative thought, built directly on the ME80's legacy and its core design conflict. The ME80 was incredibly successful because when the technology matured enough to introduce amp modeling, BAW SS immediately prioritized the physical controls, those dedicated, non-menu dependent knobs over chasing the raw modeling depth of its competitors. So given the state of the market today, where flagship modelers offer near-perfect sonic simulation but often require external editors or deep screen navigation, what critical feature or piece of physical control do you think is fundamentally missing from modern multi-effects? Because the focus is too heavily skewed towards digital realism, that pursuit of the perfect digital simulation, rather than prioritizing the practical demands of onstage usability and instant physical control.
It's something to mull over the next time you plug in and find yourself staring into a submenu instead of turning a knob.
We'll catch you next time for the next deep dive.